Hello, I'm Colleen Gallagher, CEO at Onward and Upward, and you're listening to the Association Insights podcast, where each week we interview association leaders from across the country to hear how they're trying new things, taking big risks, and delivering value for their members. We'll explore the realities of what it means to work in and with associations and bring you the insights and inspiration you need to advance your career and make big changes at your association. Let's get started.
Welcome back to Association Insights. I'm your host, Colleen Gallagher, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation as we continue our series on membership value. Today's guest is MJ Shore. MJ is the Chief Community Officer for GTIA, formerly the CompTIA Community, the only vendor-neutral nonprofit trade association for the IT channel. His global team is responsible for member engagement, programming, cybersecurity education, industry thought leadership, marketing, recruitment, and retention for the association's 2,000 plus member organizations. So you know he's got his hands full. MJ, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Colleen, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics for our listeners who aren't familiar with GTIA. Sure. Tell me about the association and who you serve.
Sure. So GTIA is the Global Technology Industry Association, and we just rebranded on January 9th of 2025. We were formerly part of what's known as CompTIA, which was the Computing Technology Industry Association, but became known mostly by the acronym CompTIA, which also became the brand. And that's a 42-year-old trade association. And over those 42 years, we had developed a very robust certification and training business, so much so that the CEO of CompTIA had the vision that there might come a time when we had the opportunity to sell off the brand and that business and endow the association in perpetuity. And that actually happened. It all came together in the fall of 2024. And on January 9th, 25, we officially separated, and CompTIA, the CompTIA brand and all of that revenue generating business went off and is now owned by a private equity partnership. And GTIA was born to carry the association forward and to do so from a place of financial security, which is amazing, very amazing for a trade association and a nonprofit, especially in these weird times we find ourselves in. But we serve what we refer to and what's known in the industry as the IT channel, which is basically the ecosystem that delivers technology solutions, be it hardware, software, consulting, to primarily small and mid-sized businesses globally. So these are big distributors. These are vendors that some are household names, some people have probably never heard of. And then our largest segment of membership are what we refer to as IT service providers or IT solution providers. These are small and mid-sized businesses typically themselves, though some are starting to scale into a more enterprise form. But these are the companies that support businesses all across the world, whether it's a doctor's office, a law firm, a small manufacturer, a large manufacturer, pretty much any business that in any way outsources their technology support or partners with an outside company to help them with their technology. So, and then I should also say, we have a class of membership that we call associate, which are firms that sell into the IT channel, marketing consultants, financial consultants, peer groups, et cetera. So it's a diverse membership, and it's about, now we're a little over 24, we're approaching 2,500 companies, but across those companies, that represents over 200,000 individuals that work for those companies. Because one unique thing about our membership structure is when the company joins, every employee of that company gets access to the membership. They have to log in and register for it. So, a big company like a Microsoft or a Hewlett Packard, for example, that has tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees, we don't count every single employee. We're only counting those that have actually attached themselves to the company membership. But that's still over 200,000 individuals that are partaking in one way or another of the benefits that we have.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Wow, to undergo such a rebrand. That had to be, I mean, both amazing to have this financial security, but also, members have this connection and they like things the way they are in association. So I would love to know how you navigated that transition with them, what strategies helped you build trust and continuity through that big change.
Well, I'm a terribly sarcastic person. So if this was video, you would see that I'm bald, and I would make the joke that I had an afro before this transition started. It was something else. It was an experience. But we had one of our, we call them flagship events, was in March of this year, and for that event, I put together a timeline, and it spanned from basically mid-October through our launch on January 9th. And then it was the middle of March when we had that event. And I layered in some milestones that took place along the way and whatnot. And then I capped that off by saying, if someone had presented this to you, for example, if you were taking a business course or an MBA course and the professor had shown you this as a case study, you'd look at it and you say, that's an amazing work of fiction. There is no way that happened in that kind of time frame. And it really is that, to describe it, you definitely get some eye rolls, but I'll tell you, it's a credit to the dedicated professionals that made this work. We had a very, very, truly an unrealistically compressed time frame in which to do this. There are very good reasons why that was, and I'll spare your listeners that boring chapter of the book, but people stepped up and people really did do what in a normal scenario you would look at and say, I can't ask people to do this. It's asking too much. But the team rallied, and it's because they're so passionate and so professional about what they do that they stepped right up and they made it happen. And we focused on making sure that there would be no interruption, or, in our vernacular at the time, as little interruption to our members as possible. And we really pulled that off. I mean, we had our first in-person event in the Netherlands in February, just not even a month after launching with the new brand. And we created the new brand and built up new systems infrastructure in under 60 days, which is unheard of. That's just unheard of.
Yeah.
But we leveraged some trusted third-party partners that we've known for a long time to help us. And as I said, everybody stepped up, and our board chair at the time, a woman named Tracy Pound from the UK, I think captured it best. She said, here you've got an existing business where you need to keep serving your customers, keep delivering your products and services with as little interruption as possible, while you rip out the entire back office infrastructure and rebuild it from ground zero, with the exception of payroll. So the smart move was we made sure the payroll system was not going to hiccup, because
good thinking.
You don't want that to happen. But we literally, we designed a new brand, came up with new taglines, came up with a brand standard, built a new website, brought in new CRM, new financial backend, new everything. As I said, well, let me think about this. Maybe it was 70 days.
Wow.
No, 60. Maybe it was 65 days or something like that. But it was a crazy timeline. It was just a crazy timeline. But it's something I'm super, super proud of everyone. It was a team effort and a real source of pride for us, through this transition.
Yeah, you should be so proud. And I hearing you talk about that passion the team brought to it, I just feel like that's such a hallmark of associations and the association space, because it is amazing what associations can do and the things they get done for their members in their industry. And this just shows it. I mean, that's incredible. I'm also curious. So you have a really unique position of having been a member and a board chair of CompTIA and before it came GTIA. So do you think that helped with this transition and being able to really communicate with the members and make sure they'd feel okay about it?
Yeah, I think so. Sure. Because, I'm really, so look, let me say it this way. I never expected to be in the role that I'm in. This was never on my bingo card, but I sold my business. So I was a member. I was what we called at the time an MSP member. I was one of those IT service providers. And I joined CompTIA back in, I believe it was the year 2000, so 25 years ago.
Wow.
And it helped my business tremendously. I became a raving fan of the organization. And I was very fortunate that I was asked to serve on the board. I was asked to represent, the smaller MSPs of our membership on the board. And then through that experience, I was asked to serve on the committee that was interviewing for our next CEO, because the current CEO was going to retire, who had built the association from 1982 through, let me think, that was 2000. I want to say it was 2008. I might be off by a year there, but close enough. So I was actually on the committee that picked the new CEO for CompTIA, a gentleman named Todd Thibodeau, who led CompTIA through the sale and chose to stay with the brand and move over. And so during that time, I served a second term on the board and eventually became the board chair. And then I sold my business 10 years ago and was doing some consulting. And Todd asked me if I would take on a project to evaluate something that CompTIA was interested in potentially taking on as an offering for its members. And lo and behold, they did decide to take it on. And he called me one day and he said, you're doing a really great job with this project. Why don't you just come on board and run it? I can't think of anyone better to do it. And I was like, wait, what did you just say? And he said, yeah, just come on board. And I'm like, well, can I think about it and talk to my wife maybe? And it was very funny. It was It was not what I expected, but it was a terrific opportunity. I mean, it was one of those opportunities that comes along in life that you didn't see coming, but you knew in your gut was not something to turn away from. It was something to embrace. And so I did come on board, and it's now what we call the GTIA Information Sharing and Analysis Organization. It's a member benefit that shares cyber threat intelligence to help our members, help their customers stay secure in a very difficult and rapidly evolving landscape of cybersecurity threats. And then about a year after that, the woman that was running our membership program at the time decided to pursue she wanted to pursue another opportunity inside CompTIA. And I got a Slack one day that said, I want to talk to you about membership. And I'm like, what do you mean you want to talk to me about membership? And that turned into, hey, take on this role as chief community officer. And so I am all kidding aside, I could not be more fortunate and more grateful for where I sit, because what I've always loved about CompTIA is that the more involved in it you found ways not only to benefit, but to also give back. And I love being able to give back. And now doing this as my full-time career and helping the organization through this transition and now continuing to build into the future is the ultimate giving back. So people who know me probably are sick of hearing it, but it's the right thing at the right time for all the right reasons.
It's so funny. I was just thinking life has a funny way of putting us where we need to be at the right moment. And this is such a great example of that.
Yeah, it's quite special. And it is reflective of our culture. It's this passion. We all have this passion to help our members, and we want to do more for more. We're grateful, but not satisfied.
Yes, I love that. I've also been impressed by how much you've grown GTI's global footprint over the years in a really big way. And so what's been the key to building community and relevance across so many diverse regions and cultures?
Well, I think, one of the things about the tech space in general is it can be a great equalizer, right? Every organization has access to technology. Now, obviously, some have bigger budgets than others, of course, but technology really can be a great equalizer. And the other thing we've seen is technology can also raise economic standards and help pull people out of difficult situations, whether it's economic adversity, racial adversity, whatever the circumstances might be. Again, technology can be a great enabler. So, I think for someone like me, I feel like we have a moral, ethical responsibility in what we do to help our industry be the absolute best that it can be. Because, and it's a little, I guess, sad, for lack of a better way to describe it, in our present time, in that we're seeing the rise of some really, disconcerting forces in the world. I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking globally. And what do we know from history? When people are given an opportunity to change their circumstance and improve their situation, whether it's for them individually, for their family, to rise out of difficult scenarios, whatever those may be, and become, self-supporting and supporting of the development in the communities where they live and improving economic conditions where they live, we see that free societies flourish in those. And when that doesn't happen, we see more authoritarian forms of governments come into play. And those countries suffer for that. I think the facts speak for themselves. So I feel like, as the IT Channel Trade Association, we have the ability to help make things better for everyone equally around the globe. So why wouldn't we? It would be irresponsible of us not to approach it that way. Now that's a little out there. I recognize that. And I don't want to suggest to you that if you pulled any GTIA employee out of the bucket and asked them the same thing, that they would repeat that. This is very much my spin on it, but I believe deeply in that. My goal is, when it's my time to walk away from this role, whether that's my choice or the organization's choice, I just want to be able to look over my shoulder and know that I've left it better than I found it. That'll be my measure of success. And as of right now, I'm pretty confident I'll be successful in that regard.
Yeah. That's an incredible perspective.
I will say
love that.
It's also a huge testament to my colleague who used to run the program, a woman named Nancy Hammervick, who I still work very closely with. She's still engaged with us, but she built the perfect foundation for us to grow the house on top. I remember when we transitioned this role, we were speaking at an event, and I said, Nancy, I've got to thank you, because you picked the most beautiful plot of land in the most lovely place, and you poured a foundation and you built a house with knowing that over time that house would need to expand. And you're handing me the keys to a house that I know I can put a second floor, third floor, heck, even a fourth floor on, if that's what the right thing to do is. And I can only do it because of the strength of the foundation and that first floor that you've built on top of it. I know it's not going to buckle under the weight of where we go. And that's a unique position to be in.
That's really incredible. I love that. And I know, as we're recording this, you're about to jet off to the UK for another one of your events. So how are those events, particularly the international gatherings, really serving as a driver for member value across really such a broad and global community?
Yeah. So, there's several things there. The UK was our first community outside of North America. We've always had, being a US based association, we've always had a strong North American membership in the US and Canada. The UK was our first, and we expanded 2 or 3 years ago now to incorporate Ireland into that. So it's now the UK and Ireland community. And then we have 4 other regional communities around the world. And it's really about, one of the true values of our association is right in the first letter of our name. It's the G in global. There is no reason why, if someone in Brisbane, Australia comes up with this brilliant, it could be a checklist, it could be a tool, it could be a service offering, we then can become the facilitator to share whatever that best practice is and whatever the learnings are that went into that with a member in Birmingham, England, or Birmingham, Alabama, or pick your city. That's where the magic happens. We really are leaning into the G in global because no other organization can truly bring that perspective to the table. And when I had my business, I had a small business in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is a very small city on the East Coast, about an hour north of Boston. But it really was a tertiary market. It's not part of the Boston urban market. It's a city by name only. It's 23,000 people. In the rest of the country, that's a small town. But in New England, hey, that's the big time. It's a city. But, I used to joke because early on in my career, there was a lot of focus in our industry on vertical expertise. So focus on healthcare, focus on legal services, this, that, or the other. And I used to joke and I said, okay, in a city of 23,000, if I focus vertically, I'm going to come down faster than I go up because there are just so many doctors' offices, law firms. Now, it's changed considerably over the last 10 years. I probably actually could focus vertically if I were still in the business now. But at the time, I had a diverse client base, and being a member of a global trade association was amazingly valuable because I was able to bring insights and knowledge and industry research, for example, unbiased research with a global perspective. And I could share that with my clients and not charge them for it because I wasn't being charged for it. It was part of my member benefit. So I would share these resources and say, look, I know we're a small business ourselves, but I want you to hopefully, value the fact that we can bring a lot of expertise to the table by way of all this insight that we have access to that if we were just a small little local business, we wouldn't have. And that was a good competitive differentiator for us at the time. And today it's even more so because with the rate of evolution, cyber threats, AI, you name it, the industry is changing as fast, if not faster than it ever has, as is the impact on any business around the world. So the ability to share expertise and share learnings and challenges and failures and to be able to build that network to exchange those ideas is critical, absolutely critical to the success of anyone in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. One of my big takeaways here, you talk about it, is I feel like all of the most successful trade associations that I hear from can clearly articulate the value to their members and pinpoint real examples of why. And so that just comes through so clearly there. And I think, you mentioned the diversity of your members and just the wide range of members you serve too, just from MSPs, solution providers, vendors, distributors, industry partners. That's a big ecosystem there.
It is.
So how do you create value that resonates across that whole ecosystem?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time listening to our members. Absolutely. We have a new CEO now, a gentleman by the name of Dan Wensley, who I think I mentioned maybe before we started recording, is a former board member as well, is a former member, came from the vendor space, but had always created communities within the vendor community. Sorry, I'm using that word a little too much, but he's bringing a really important and needed lens to what we do because he's sharing things that he's learned over his 30-year career that directly relate to how we're trying to grow our benefits, grow our impact, and grow our membership. Quite frankly, we haven't served enough members over the years. We have a lot of members, but the total membership pool that's out there is multiple times what our membership numbers are. So in many respects, we feel like we're challenging ourselves to reach more members because the members we reach, it's always a terrific experience. Our satisfaction rates, our net promoter scores are off the charts. So Dan has really challenged the organization to think differently, like, how do we do more for more? We're doing a lot of good work. Let's do it for even more of the industry than we have. And let's push our impact to levels that we've perhaps never even thought about. And it's a result of the sale that we're able to do that, because we're no longer competing for resources within the organization. We're solely focused on our members now. So that makes all the difference in the world. But it's listening. Some members, our vendor members, for example, they value our events and they value a specific training course, something we call Managing the Technology Channel, that trains their business development managers. They love that because they pay us, annual dues, and they can send as many of their people through that training as they want, which would cost them who knows how many times what their annual dues are if they developed it themselves or paid someone to deliver the training. So, we look there. Our ITSP members, I mentioned that information sharing and analysis organization before. Many of our members who engage with that say it has kept them safe through some very challenging times and has helped them avoid threats that could have hit them or their customers, because it's a safe, secure space where our members share what they're seeing out there. And we have lots of what are called threat intelligence feeds and tools in there that would cost a member thousands of dollars a month if they went out and subscribed to these things on their own, but they get it as part of their dues, which are less than $500 a year. So it's less than $500 a year or $1,000 or more a month. Easy math, right?
Wow.
So I think, one of the things we've recognized is that historically we haven't been good at tooting our own horn. And when I say that, I don't mean, obviously I don't mean to do that in a cavalier, or I'm drawing a blank on the right word, but, not in an inappropriate way, but right. To say, look, we are investing millions of dollars to help your business. Take advantage of this, and getting down to those one or two crystal clear value statements that resonate. I was just talking with one of my staff this morning, and she was picking my brain about when I had my MSP, and she said, "You always talked about the research." And I'm like, yeah, the unbiased research was that paid for my membership and then some, and enabled me to have some incredibly loyal relationships with customers who became friends and confidants, because I was I could sit there and say, look, I know I'm talking to you about these things. And yes, of course, I run a business. I'm trying to sell more services or what have you. But here's the unbiased research that says you need this. And these are the reasons why your business needs this: to mitigate risk, to avoid, added costs that you can mitigate, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, of course, I'm trying to grow my business, but I'm also trying to do it ethically and responsibly, and not just sell you a shiny widget, but recommend and deliver solutions that will help you grow your business over time. And I've got so many great stories of clients that, we kind of grew together over the years, and some of them sold at one point and retired or whatever. And, I had a great conversation with one of my clients one time where he said, "Remember when we met around my dining room table?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Here we are 15 years later, and you're bigger, and I just sold, and all of my staff are keeping their jobs, and I'm going to get to retire early. You helped me do that." And I was like, that was, I always think of that, because I'm like, boy, the impact we have is so much more than what we just see in front of us on a daily basis. Like, because he was saying, we've both put food on our employees' tables for the last umpteen years, and now I'm going to get to go do this, and none of my employees are losing their job. And he was super proud of that, as well he should be.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's you have to tell those great stories. I think that's something that associations really need to lean into. Is it's one thing if the association staff says it, it's a whole nother ball game when the members say it.
Nobody tells a member story like a member.
Yeah, 100%. And our members are awesome storytellers. We've got a phenomenal library of testimonials and whatnot. And we're gonna be more. We're going to share more than as I said, we were kind of humble to a fault for a long time. And now we're trying to find that line of maintaining our humility, but also really talking about the good work that we do and the difference that it makes for our members.
Yep. I hope our listeners are taking note here too, because I do think this is something that applies to almost all of the associations that we work with and talk with on a regular basis, is that you have to tell your story. And you're not bragging, you're not being, oh, look at us. You're showing the value and you're helping more people learn how they can be helped. And that's why it matters. So I do think that's something that is really important for associations to get over that feeling of, oh, we don't want to sound like we're bragging, and be like, hey, we do something great and we can help you. And that's the stories to get out there.
You've captured that really well. That's you said it better than I did.
Too funny. Well, I am a communicator, so I try.
Yeah, there you go.
I know another big differentiator for GTIA is your cybersecurity programming. So I'd love to hear about how that programming helps become a value driver. You've talked about the research, but what about that front?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge driver for us, and something that we're continuing to lean into more and more. Cybersecurity is really one of the, it's what's the right way to describe this? It's probably the biggest business threat that we face. I mean, it's beyond a business threat. It is hacking and cyber attacks and what have you. I mean, that has really become almost an existential threat to the world order. I mean, we've seen all kinds of things over the last 10 or more years that are related to cyber. We're continuing to see it. Now you start to introduce AI and deep fakes and all that. It's becoming more and more difficult for the average individual to truly understand if they're looking at something that's legitimate and real or something that could be fake. Just recently, there's been all this hullabaloo about the AI actress that's upsetting Hollywood and everything.
Right.
You're seeing it everywhere. So we recognized, over 6 years ago at this point, if I'm remembering correctly, that we really needed to help our members from the cyber front. And technology can only do so much, right? Technology can do a lot, but it can only do so much. I mentioned the cybersecurity threat intelligence sharing organization that we have, and that's been huge. But what's equally important in that is a secure online hub that we have where members talk to each other. And so they're talking about the threats that they're seeing and how it's impacting their customers. And when something a little broader emerges in the world, there's discussion about, oh yeah, here's how we're able to prevent it, or sometimes there are things that can't be prevented, and how do you respond to them? Let's be very honest about the fact that if a nation state or an exceedingly well-funded bad actor wants to target you, chances are they're gonna be successful. Unless you're the scale of General Motors or a nation state yourself, you're not going to be able to maintain the defensive posture you need to keep everything out. We see it all the time, and one of the big things we recognized is there's an inverted culture around these things. There's too much cyber shaming going on out there. Like, oh, Target got hit with a breach. Oh, Target's the worst. Let's never shop at Target again. How could they? Oh my God. Well, guess what? Then it happens to Walmart, or, on and on it goes. We have to encourage people to share what they're seeing when these things happen to help protect, yes, their competitors and their friends and their enemies and everyone in between. Because if we don't, it's only going to get worse. So we're putting a lot of emphasis into educating our members about risk, not just cyber risk, but business risk. What is the risk if you don't take these steps? What is the impact if you have this or that happen? And I remember when I sold my business, I merged into a friendly competitor, and then we were acquired by another organization. And when that was throughout that process, I remember working with a client who had a pretty bad cyber event happen. I won't share the details to protect the impact, it obviously, but I remember being on a conference call with the CEO, their legal counsel, their accountant, their accountants, their risk managers, their insurance company, the insurance company's risk people. And we were all having a conversation, and the CEO said, because we were their service provider, and the CEO said, I want you to tell me how to be 100% secure. And I said, I will never tell you that you can be 100% secure. And if anyone ever tells you that you can be 100% secure, you better run away from that person as fast as you found them, because it's just not real. It's not possible. And he started to debate me, and I was shocked, because it was actually, I think, the insurance company's risk manager who chimed in and said, what MJ just said to you is the most honest and accurate thing I've ever heard a technology person say. So you should probably listen.
Yeah.
There's no way to guarantee in our current climate. So, education becomes so critically important. So, for example, at our event in the UK next week, we have 3 cyber workshops running on the first day about different aspects of risk management and tolerance, and how to talk with small and mid-sized businesses. And we're working with government agencies and law enforcement organizations across the globe. But we've got a couple people from, in the UK, they have something called the Cyber Resilience Center, which is a really good national network of these organizations that are typically sponsored by the police with government support to help keep businesses safe. And so we've got a couple of them that are participating in the event next week, and talking about how their work with us has helped them. So it's a real mission for us, and it's something we're going to continue to lean into and lead with, because with the advent of AI, cybersecurity and AI are converging faster than we've ever seen anything converge. And so AI in and of itself can be a cyber threat,
Right.
a pretty big one. And I think, there are more people who don't understand where the risk component of AI comes in than does, because it's a really enticing technology. It can save you time. It can do tasks for you. It's very intoxicating when you start to play with it. But there are risks you have to understand, especially if your business has any form of intellectual property. If you leak that into an AI model, see ya.
Yep.
there go. You could have every patent in the world, but if you just shared it broadly, yep, your competitors are going to copy, and it's going to be hard to chase that down. And that's just the very tip of the iceberg. So yeah, cyber has become a key piece of what we do, and that team continues to do amazing work. Just, everything we hear from our members is thank you.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we've been looking for, exactly what we need. And we do it very collaboratively with our members too. We are smart people. There's no question about it. We've got incredible talent across the team. But as I said earlier, we listen to our members, and we take their input very seriously. We try to be very member-led in what we do to make sure that it has the right impact.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love that you're tackling one of the most prominent problems facing so many companies right now head on, because talk about value and bringing value to your members. You're not shying away, and it is, every company is going to be impacted by this and is impacted. So I think that's just incredible. And when we talk about membership value, I kind of want to put a bow on things here, because this is a part of a series we've done talking to membership folks at associations and really honing in on what that value is. And I do think it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and depending on your organization's mission. So I'd love to hear for GTIA, what does delivering value really look like now? And what do you think it's going to look like in the years ahead?
So, today it looks like several different things, right? We have events around the world, as you said. We put on, I forget how many events we did last year. That was the other funny metric we looked at. We're like, wait, we did that many events? We do. Sometimes it feels like we've got multiple events a month, but we put on a lot of in-person events, and we want to do more of that. We want to even do more smaller meetup, intimate type events as well. So there's, that always has tremendous value for our members. They love to get together and network and meet peers, and especially in areas like Europe where it's easy to do, or even in ASEAN, in Asia Pacific, it's a bit easier to do. We've got members hopping countries, hopping regions all the time. So, we're going to have our event next week is called ChannelCon EMEA. Even though it's in the UK, we know we're going to have people from Ireland. We're going to have people from the Benelux region. We're going to have people from the DACH region, so there'll be plenty of European representation, continental representation as well. And that's very common. Similar in ASEAN, when we have, we had an amazing meeting in Jakarta just last month. We had 250 some odd attendees, I think. But we had people from Malaysia, we had people from Singapore, we had people from Thailand, we had, people from all over. And that's great. So that's, we certainly measure value around participation at our events and what we hear from our members about the value of being at the event. Our research and education is tremendous. It's huge. That is a massive benefit. We spend millions of dollars a year developing this, and our members get it for, small amounts of money.
Right.
And that's intentional because we want them to take it up and use it. Our cyber programs, that's it. We have a program called advisory councils, which are sort of like the guiding lights on where the industry is heading. We have 6 different advisory councils that focus on different either business or technology areas. We recruit, those are invitation councils. We go out and we look for the best subject matter experts in the field in our corner of the industry to help develop resources, tools, inform our education, be spokespeople on our behalf on the given areas of expertise that they have. So that's a tremendous resource pool that members have access to. It's all of these things together make up the value prop that we put out there. And I think one of the challenges we've always had is we could fill a book describing our value. What we're really learning and focusing in on now is boiling it down to some very succinct value statements. Like, I grew my business because of this GTIA benefit. We have a thriving mentorship program going on globally right now. We've had 2 members tell us, I was promoted 6 months earlier than I even thought I was eligible as a direct result of participating in the mentorship program. My superiors
awesome.
noticed that, I raised my game considerably and I advanced faster in my career. So, it's getting down to those very specific examples. I took this education course and got this benefit. I implemented this practice or this learning and I dropped my expenses or I raised my profitability, things like that. We also, our events, our larger events, including the one next week in the UK, we have the vendor members can exhibit and have a booth or a stand. And we do things a little differently than a traditional trade show. Everybody gets the same size space. We try to do this level playing field because we are a neutral nonprofit association. And members have told us for years they love that because it gives them the ability to talk with the biggest vendors and the newest startups in a very even, low pressure environment because there's no massive pavilion with 1 million salespeople trying to rope you in and whatnot. The conversations are more intimate and a higher caliber, and they get to learn about some new solutions out there that could really help their business. So it's a broad value prop, but we're really focusing in on how do we tell those stories in snackable bites that resonate. If you put this energy in, you get this energy out. And the most successful members are the ones that I see come into it really wanting to give and engage without looking for a definitive specific outcome. And they wind up getting so much value. They tell the best stories.
Yeah, that's so good. I love this. This has been such an amazing conversation. And I mean, so many great takeaways. Before we let you go, though, MJ, we like to end all of our podcasts with a little just for fun section so our
Sure.
listeners can get to know you a little better. First off, a little rapid fire style here. Have you gotten to get away to anywhere fun lately?
Yes, we took a great trip to Aruba the end of
Nice.
last year that we absolutely loved. I had a big birthday and
Awesome.
we just had the best time. So that was a lot of fun, and we've got a trip coming up in another month to Hawaii. So that'll be an awful lot of fun too.
Incredible. That'll be fantastic. So cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so are you a podcast listener? And if so, is there one or two you'd recommend for our listeners?
I'm going to be, so one of my hallmarks is, so here are my 4 leadership principles: trust, transparency, clear and consistent communication, and no drama. So in the transparency department, I am a really poor podcast consumer. I don't know why. My wife loves audiobooks, and audiobooks don't do it for me. So the other thing I will say is I spend far less time in a car now than I ever have in my life.
That'll do it.
So I haven't found, my kids are all avid podcast listeners. I'm not a good podcast listener, and I'm embarrassed to say that, especially because this has been such a blast of a conversation. I need to be listening to this podcast.
I'm going to send you a list and we'll give you some ideas.
I'm trying to get better about it, but I'm a little embarrassed to admit I don't know if it's, my age group, because I've been, this isn't native technology to me or native media to me, but I'm trying to get better at it. I don't have any podcasts that like super jump out as standards, but I do have a bunch that I list that are all about the industry. I probably need to find one that really speaks to something that, like, a hobby, one of my hobbies that will get me hooked into the medium. But yeah, I need to be a better podcast listener because it's a great medium. It really is. I totally get it.
Yeah, it's funny. I got hooked so many years ago when they were still actually kind of new, and Freakonomics, and I had always loved that book. And they would do, Freakonomics style stories on all these different things on each episode, and it was just the most fascinating thing. And then it just took off from there. And now I listen to way too many. I listen to them on 2x speed, which I don't recommend, but my brain now just functions in that speed. So
I've turned into again, I don't know if this is just a generational thing or not, but I've turned into a total Apple News junkie. I've got my news feed populated with so much stuff, and from like the true news stuff that I look at, I've got news from all angles, all parts of the world, because I like to understand the full picture of what's going on. And I like to know what, if there's something I don't agree with, I like to know why the people that do agree with it, so I can try and balance. I'm a big believer in dialogue solves all problems, and it's when we retreat into our echo chambers, that's when we all get in a little bit of trouble,
right?
So that's I can probably replicate that with a podcast, and should probably think about doing that with a diverse set of
someday
podcasts. I'll get there. I will get there.
Too funny. All right, what's one place in the US you've never been but are dying to go?
In the US, ooh, that's interesting. Probably either California to see the redwoods.
Ooh, that'd be good.
Or like Zion National Park, or what's the other one? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. And also Banff in Canada.
Yeah,
but that's Canada.
We'll say North America. Okay, we'll give you a little extension there. That's a really cool area.
But yeah, a couple of the national parks more out west, or Banff would be in there too.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Last one for you. Finish this sentence. When you see me looking at my phone, it probably means that I'm...
Oh boy. It probably means I'm on Facebook. Yeah.
Now that might be the thing that dated yourself there.
Yeah. I am that generation. I mean, I will say this. Facebook has become such a mess. I'll just say it that way. But I come from a pretty big family. My dad was one of 10, and my wife's family is pretty good size as well. It is the best way to keep up with what's going on with the family.
It's so easy to share family
and
stuff.
The younger generation's in there too. A lot of them are more on Instagram now, but I'm probably looking to see what family and friends are up to. It's a good way to stay connected. And oftentimes it'll prompt you to make a phone call because you'll see someone, you'll see a friend or family member post something and you haven't talked to them in a while. And you'd be like, I want to talk to that person.
I love that. Well, MJ, this has been so much fun. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Colleen. This has been a blast.
That's a wrap for today's episode. The Association Insights podcast, previously known as the Association 100 podcast, is a production of Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications, where our mission is to make associations and nonprofits the go-to source in their industries through earned media and thought leadership. This podcast is an extension of our newsletter, a bi-monthly collection of best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies delivered straight to your inbox. Have you undertaken a big change at your association? Or do you have some words and wisdom from the trenches of association life? We want to hear from you, and so do our listeners. Drop us a note at info@onwardupward.com. That's info@onwardupwrd.com. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share with your friends and colleagues. We're available anywhere podcasts are found. Come back next week for more association insights and inspiration. Thanks for tuning in.